Hi everyone, welcome to our first Access VFX Oceania chapter podcast, which we've been talking about for a while and are super excited to actually launch formally today. Firstly, before we started, we thought we would talk a little bit about why it is that we called our chapter down south Access VFX Oceania. After a lot of discussion between us all, we're all based in Australia and New Zealand. There were lots of names discussed, and there's usually a little bit of friction between Australia and New Zealand, and we ended up with Oceania, which is the region of the world that consists of the islands of the Pacific Ocean and the seas around them. And it includes actually a whole lot of islands, including Australia and New Zealand, as well as places like Micronesia and Fiji and Solomon Islands and Tonga and Vanuatu. I don't think at the moment that there are any visual effects companies in those small Pacific islands, but if there are, it would be great to have them join us, or maybe we could all move to a small Pacific island and open a visual effects company there. So with us today, we have most of our Oceania chapter board, and we thought we would start by just going through and introducing ourselves. Today, I would like to introduce Dora Morioli. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself, Dora?
Hey everybody, hello. My name is Dora. My pronouns are they, them. And I'm a lead pipeline engineer for working for Weta Digital. It's been 4 years. I'm originally from Italy. And yeah, I have over 10 years of experience in visual effects and animation pipeline especially. I'm a strong advocate for better diversity and inclusion in the computer graphic industry. So I want to participate in Access Visual Effects to bring my passion for fighting for better quality and especially for gender minorities, disabled people, and people with diverse sexual orientations. So here I am. And we also have a Christy Grant.
Kia ora everybody, my name is Christy Grant. I'm a director and founder and co-owner of Miramar Creative Limited and Lane Street Studios Limited. So our organisation works to bridge the gap between academia and industry and that pipeline in between. We have programs that run for students from the age of 12 all the way through to tertiary and then into industry. Our biggest focus really is on the sustainability component that's required for our industry, both from an education and a physical structure point of view, hence the studio capacity. Something that I'm really passionate about in terms of the D&I space, the diversity and inclusion, is the significant voice and benefit that I've seen it give to our young people within our programs that we're working with, as I say, with our high school students. It happens in such an organic way in terms of the stories that they tell, but the benefit that it brings and the cohesion that it brings for our young people is substantial. So I want to make sure that in all of our organisations and all of our projects that we incorporate that same openness and inclusivity. So that's something I'm very passionate about. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Amber, you're on.
All right, so tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Waikari tana whārau, he piko, he taniwha, he piko, he taniwha. Ko a tainui toko waka, ko waikato toko awa, ko taupiri toko monga, ko tainui toko iwi, ko te wherewhere te tangata, ko Amber Māori toko ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So kia ora, thanks for having me. I'm Amber Māori. As a Māori indigenous woman here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, it's very important for me to be a part of this conversation, to be able to help promote our rangatahi, our youth, our Māori and Pacifica and minority youth into this space, into visual effects, into the film industry. And so a reason why I'm a part of this is that I want to make sure that we have a voice. We're big storytellers, so being a part of that storytelling process is really important. And also it's important for me to be able to ensure that there's a pathway, an opportunity for our youth to be able to get in and get involved. So kia ora for having me a part of this conversation today, a kōrero, and it's really absolute honour to be a part of what we're doing here for Oceania. So kia ora.
Thanks, Amber. That was so cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Tim, good luck.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to follow up on that. So hi, my name's Tim Parsons and I work as a Nuke Flow a nuke workflow and technical specialist here for Foundry in Sydney, Australia. I lead a team of customer support engineers from our Sydney office. And the reason why I want to get involved in Access VFX is having both being a compositor and lecturer in the industry, I've seen firsthand a lot of the challenges that our students and up-and-coming artists kind of come into when they start in this industry. So as a community, I feel we can do like a lot more than what we're currently doing at the moment. And I'm pretty excited to have the opportunity to make a genuine difference here with Access VFX. Oh yeah, and also another thing that excites me is the mentorship program, and being involved in the mentorship program would be great, especially for the community we have down here to be able to help the local community even further. Yeah.
Thanks,
Also,
Tim.
let's introduce Lara.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lara Hopkins. I work at ILM as the Senior Manager of Talent Management, and I've worked for about 25, 30 years now in animation and visual effects. The diversity piece has been something that's always been lurking in the back of my mind, and for the longest time I've kind of just accepted that our industry lacked in diversity because it just was. I hadn't really thought about it. And then over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, and particularly around becoming a mother, I realized that there were lots of things that made the industry quite hard to work in, both as a parent and as a woman. And then gradually I've obviously become much more aware of other areas of diversity that's quite lacking. So because my role has always been around recruitment and talent management, I can see that there's things that I can do both within and now externally to my role. Access VFX is something I've been watching for years, and have known people being involved in it. And I'm so excited to include the Southern Hemisphere in this. It's a logical thing for us to do, considering we're part of such a big global visual effects and animation community. I'd say my particular passion or area of expertise is being a mum and working in visual effects and animation and focusing on the gender piece, but I'm also extremely passionate about Indigenous representation here in Australia as well. So that's me. So we'd like to now just go forward and introduce a few more of the people that are involved in the chapter. Dora?
Yeah, I'll introduce Sandy Taylor. She is a co-lead of the chapter. Sandy Taylor is based in Wellington, New Zealand, and is Weta Digital's head of organizational development, with 30 years of experience in the film and visual effects industry, working as an editor, in production, in leadership, and more recently in people and culture. Sandy brings a wealth of personal experience and insight, and a passionate commitment to building an industry that is welcome to everyone.
And I'd like to introduce Mike Ring, who's successfully navigated a midlife career change to VFX and is working as a technical assistant at Rising Sun Pictures in Adelaide. Mike is interested in mental health, minority representation, and gender diversity in the industry.
I'll also introduce Rebecca. Rebecca Hand recently entered the industry and is currently working as an assistant technical director at Weta Digital. As someone who just started in the professional sphere, she is eager to provide a fresh perspective on the challenges facing young people looking to be part of visual effects. Let's start with some questions. And so the first topic we want to discuss is, what does diversity and inclusion look like in visual effects, animation, and games in Oceania today? Lara and Christy, you want to speak about that? Let's start with Christy.
Sure, thank you. I think, as I mentioned, our organisation, we really work at the beginning of that education and engagement pipeline, which I think is absolutely vital for the future development of our sector, and that obviously goes hand in hand with incorporating and including the wide range of talent that exists in our sector. So we see that in young people, that it happens naturally. You know, there's a story to be told, and there is a diverse range of voices to be heard, and we try to incorporate that into everything we do. It just makes sense, and that's starting to make sense on a broader scale in New Zealand, which is fantastic. Not only driven through international engagement, where it's very much even more commonplace, and that conversation is happening more and more. But I think it is starting to really be something that most organisations are incorporating into their policies, into their processes, and into their mana and into their way that they approach and respect one another in an organisation. Because I think it's the way that our society is heading. It's the way that we need to be, I think, in order to understand and engage with each other a little bit more on an international basis. And so I'm excited to see that becoming more and more commonplace. And I think and not just a conversation, but real structures, as I say, and processes that are being implemented into a lot of organisations, which gives us a lot more momentum, which is fantastic.
Absolutely.
I think in general, we were talking when we first started this chapter about what actually are the statistics in Australia and New Zealand, and we don't have exact statistics of what our diversity is like in our workplaces, but I think it's pretty fair to assume that it's pretty much the same as the rest of the world. I don't think we have any more or less, which is probably, in terms of gender representation, probably 60 to 70% male and 30 to 40% female, something like that. And also the representation of men at senior levels and supervisor levels far outweighs the women, and women often then generally end up in production roles or support roles. So of that 60-40 split, the 40% who are women do generally, tend to be in non-supervisor, non-creative director roles. And I think that's, for me, something that I would really love to try and help to change. And it's something that is not going to happen overnight, because we need to actually get the people in at the early stages. We need to help them form their careers. We need to provide women with ways to navigate having children or having a career sort of that might meander rather than go from step to step to step to step, and also provide then hopefully more women in senior roles, so that other women who are starting their journey actually can see that there's a place for them in those sort of senior roles if that's where they want to go. So I do think that the other part of the diversity piece in our both of our countries is the indigenous representation, which is very low. And then there's also sort of socioeconomic representation. I think we probably all can see a similar type of person that ends up in visual effects, and quite often it doesn't come from kids who can't afford to go to university. I'm very keen to sort of look at the way we can get more people in from a wider range of places. So I think it's very inspiring to be involved in Access VFX, who have done so much work so far in terms of working out the statistics, and we can learn so much from what the other chapters have done to sort of help Australia and New Zealand in the same way start to address these things in their companies.
Absolutely, I think you've touched on a really good point there, because I think a lot of the time being able to access that data and that actual information in terms of engagement, but also the positive effects that has supported, I think is really important. And being a part of Access VFX and expanding that story a little bit wider into Oceania is something that's really, really important. And also it brings a little bit more weight to what we're doing, being involved in an organisation that's already got that track record too. So that's very exciting. I agree.
One thing we thought we would talk about, because it is the hot topic that we're all dealing with on a day-to-day basis, is how has the global pandemic affected our industry here in Oceania? And I'd love for us to have a quick chat about that. Dora, you had some thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there have been many effects of the pandemic that the pandemic had on our industry. The main one for me is that we went from an industry that was quite strict on security aspects, especially working with clients like Disney and Marvel, where they have a lot of requirements. So we need to have a swipe card and cannot wear a hoodie and things like that. We went from being almost impossible to work from home to in the matter of like 2-3 days, 1,500 people moved to a home station, and without almost no technical problems there. Was a really good experience, and I feel like, at least for a company like Weta, there was such a positive experience from the people working remotely. The improved life of actually the workers itself, and also life of the company, because now they're able to hire remotely, which was impossible until like a few months ago. So we have people working from Canada, Europe, working for WET. That's incredible. And I think the other aspect that is a bit more negative in a way is that all the production has shut off. So we are now currently need to find other ways to create work, which will be interesting more next year than this year. I'm pretty sure the industry can find ways to change it, change itself, and evolve again, like it always has done. So maybe push towards animation or visual effects in a different way than that has been before.
It's at the time where we're also desperate for content to help us through this hard time. It's such a difficult time. Tim, you've been working a lot with a lot of companies who are facing lots of challenges during remote working. Have you got some?
Yeah, so a lot of the companies that I work with in the local region, obviously they've had to face quite a few kind of problems hitting that they've hit during this kind of time period. But I suppose as a company founder itself, my team works remotely from the UK. So it's a bit tricky to navigate the first few steps for our team. But because we had our own little bit of independence and tight collaboration between us already, we were very much able to kind of work together as a team really well. And it's kind of kept us strong and productive. So we've had a bit of a separate way of working here independently. But in regards to our customer base, yeah, I mean, both like Japan, like our APAC area, and China have also kind of been on the front foot with webinars and getting everything like that out there to our customers and being able to facilitate their needs as well. So yeah, there has been a bit of an impact out here. But I kind of personally think that within Australia and New Zealand anyway, we've been a bit less hit, fortunately, by COVID than the rest of the world. So we're kind of being able to get back on the front foot a lot quicker, I think, than everybody else in the world, which has been pretty good. So you can kind of see, like in South Australia and New South Wales, production was still shooting during COVID, like stuff like Mortal Kombat and a couple of other things were being shot at the same time. And especially you've got like a big animation focus in Sydney in specific. So you've got like Animal Logic and Flying Bark, who both very much are animation studios. And not having to have to shoot footage and actually continue through COVID, I think has been really good for the Sydney area in particular. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And also the point you raised, Tim, that actually with everybody being remote, that you have more possibility to do events that are now accessible for everybody. So there's more accessibility to podcasts or to webinars and courses and things that before were only in person, like SIGGRAPH and conferences of visual effects would cost so many thousands of dollars just to fly to a location. Now that you can just attend from your computer at home, which is incredible.
Thought a little bit too about how the remote working scenario, is it a positive thing or a negative thing for people with coming from diverse backgrounds? I think you could look at it both ways, because obviously working from home, there's some flexibility there that you gain when you've got other things to juggle. But on the flip side of that too, if you're coming from potentially a family that doesn't have good internet access or enough rooms, that also is quite hard, and it might exclude some people who come from socioeconomic backgrounds that don't lend themselves to being able to work from home. And I also think for our junior members of the industry who haven't got strong mentorships in place, I think it's probably quite challenging we've onboarded quite a few people in quite junior roles who are working from home, and they're not getting that sort of unscheduled kind of help from the senior people around them to onboard them and to teach them and to sort of help them on their day. And I do worry about some isolation creeping in, particularly amongst teams that sort of aren't sitting together or haven't even met. So it's an interesting challenge to try and keep teams working well together and make sure that everybody in the team is actually looked after and feeling good.
Yeah, to add to that, I also feel like now juniors has so much more. There's so much more competition because even if you're not local to New Zealand now, it doesn't matter because there's so much many other artists with more experience than you that don't live in New Zealand that can now compete with you. So that's harder for a new starter to visual effects to actually get the job right now if you don't have much experience.
Definitely kind of roll into a bit of unconscious bias too when you're selecting teams, that, you know, if you've got the option to hire somebody in another country who's sort of looks identical to you, or to hire somebody who's diverse, who's local, who perhaps isn't as experienced, it is something that we all need to be mindful of, I think. Otherwise you could really end up with a very lazy recruitment process, really, because it just is just too easy to find somebody to do it who's got all that experience.
Absolutely. Sorry, Christy, you go.
Yeah, if I could add to that, because I think it's been very, very interesting in terms of COVID has been a great leveler, because everyone now is in the same situation as you touched on. I think you can have more online interaction because that's what everybody's doing. So I think that's been really interesting. For us, we've explored as much as possible ways for remote business collaboration to continue, and obviously that very much is a focus through achieving that digitally. So that's been quite interesting. I have to say, in terms of what I've noticed from an inclusion point of view, is that our team members who are diverse in terms of, which we haven't really touched on, but neurally, so in terms of ADHD or autism or whatnot, within that spectrum, the team members I found have actually really thrived in an environment where they can work more remotely and within their own environment at home. They've really picked up on that and have done extremely well and been extremely productive. I've found the team members who, in terms of, especially around like our events planning and in that face-to-face type of engagement, they've struggled because obviously that aspect of our organisation and everybody's has completely come to a halt. But I've seen an interesting way in that work has changed, but some really positive things I think overall is what we've seen so far.
That's really a good point, Christy. Thank you. Going back to families in visual effects, I was wondering what it's like for families, people with families working in this industry, especially maybe talking about the effects of the pandemic. Tim, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so for me, I myself have got a toddler, 2 years old almost, in a few weeks actually, so almost there. But yeah, it's a bit of a different ballgame, to be honest. I mean, having to juggle your time between home and work when your work is at home is a very different kind of dynamic than jumping in on a train, public transport, 40 minutes, get to work, go to work. It's hard to sometimes separate the two. So there's a definite juggle involved there, and stuff like time zones as well. So I deal with a UK company, and so having time zones, kind of working with different time zones is very tricky. So kind of coming in and having to do maybe meetings at 7, 8, 9 at night, having to put Evan to bed at the same time. It's a very kind of tricky kind of situation. And it's really very much about being honest, I think, with your boss and your colleagues about what's achievable too. So I'm very honest with my guys, just saying, hey guys, okay, Evan decided that the blue color of his pants today is not what he wants, and he's crying for an hour about it. I need to go. So, I mean, it's very weird situations like that. But I mean, yeah, knowing your limits as well is a big thing, especially from working from home. So knowing that, okay, right, I've got 10 meetings in this week. How am I going to divvy them up? I need to start to schedule things out a bit better. You become a bit more kind of like, yeah, not necessarily reliant on what needs to be done, but kind of like you work through things in a different kind of way. And isolation itself, I suppose, can be tricky when you're working from home, and you got to know your own work limits. I kind of emphasized that a bit before, but not being afraid to say no, and just saying, hey, okay, I've got work at home, I've got like my boy to worry about, I've got different things in my life outside of work, and being able to say, hey, actually, I'm drawing the line here for a bit because I've got to get some stuff done. There's nothing wrong with that. And I suppose there's always this mantra as a dad, that like, oh, you've got to make sure you're on that kind of front foot, being the breadwinner, making sure your family's okay. But that isn't also important to be able to think about yourself at the same time. So that's one of the reasons as well why I've kind of brought on myself into Access VFX, is to think about that too. Like dads can work in visual effects and be the full-time dad at the same time. It is possible. It's just very difficult, but it's possible.
Tim, it's just so, I can't even say how lovely it is to hear a dad talking about that shared parenting responsibilities, because I think there's a real generational shift right now about men feeling comfortable about saying, I'm a dad, I have stuff to do, I'm sharing this. Because for the longest time, sort of the home life, the kind of workload and the emotional and mental stress of looking after children quite often were on the woman's shoulders.
Yeah, I
and
definitely agree.
It was almost like it was assumed that there was no other responsibilities that men had. So you could come to work and work for 100 hours a week because you had someone at home looking after all the bits and bobs that you have to do when you've got children, whereas a true sharing parenting is the way of the future. And the more men who think the way you're thinking, the more women can also then find it easier to work as well, because they're not doing it all on their own and it's not all on their shoulders, and they're not making their own career sacrifices, which has happened for a lot of the time.
It's very much a team effort here in my household. It's very much kind of like, we'll kind of get to the start of the week and we'll go, okay, right, this is what our week looks like. My wife still works part-time. She works 3 days a week, and I know in the mornings I'll go drop off, and we work it out, and that's how you kind of work through it. I mean, it is a collaboration, like the same way you collaborate with your teams, like you're collaborating with your family to be able to get things done and to be able to, at the end of the day, I kind of, my best analogy is rubber ball, glass ball. If you've ever heard the analogy before. So in my mind, work is a rubber ball, where if you're juggling maybe 5 or 6 different balls, you've got your glass balls, which are work, family, health, spirit, and these kind of aspects of your life. So juggling all your balls, if you drop your work ball is going to bounce. Your work ball is always going to bounce back. It's always up and down, it's just like a bad day at work, bounces back up, better day tomorrow. But if you drop your glass ball, which is like your family and your health, it's going to shatter, it's going to break, and you're not going to be able to repair that. So that's always in the back of my mind when I think of these kind of things, is like rubber ball, glass ball, what's important, how do your priorities lie as you move through both your career, which you've worked hard at, and your family life, which is also just as important.
That's such a good analogy. I never heard it before.
It's a fantastic analogy.
Yeah. It was from a CEO at, I heard it a few years back actually. It's from a CEO at Coca-Cola, I think, a few years ago during a presentation to university. And I always just carried that in the back of my mind. I'm like, yeah, what is important to you? How does it work in your mind? Yeah.
And that applies for everybody in terms of their mental health and their ability to work as well. It's family as well as, if getting you through the day means that you have to do yoga every morning, you need to prioritize that so you can be your best at work. And, a lot of people, I've sort of limped through early childhood years. My kids are now teenagers, which does enable me all of a sudden to sort of have a fresh look at a career, and working full time has become a lot easier now than it was. But, a lot of people have said to me, I used to be a producer, and there's no accident that when I had my first child, I moved into talent management, because I just couldn't think, how on earth could I produce and be a mum? I just couldn't imagine at all being able to do it. And if any of you have ever tried to hire a good senior producer who's been working in the industry for 25 or 30 years, it can be quite hard to find them, because producers are usually women, and often women have children, and often women find it very difficult to juggle that role and to do both things. So there is actually quite a lack of senior producers around in visual effects, because a lot of them drop off in their 30s and 40s because of trying to juggle career responsibilities. So it is a challenge, and it is something I think at Access VFX it's great to talk about. It's great to talk about with other companies about how they can support their women through those periods, so that when they're ready to come back, they can come back. And also to talk about flexibility for men and women if they have children and need to be able to sort of navigate those early years of sleepless nights, but still want to keep their foot in the door, because the minute you leave, it does become very hard to come back in.
I think you touched on something quite important there, Lara, as well, in regards to people being like multi-skilled as well, multi-talented in their areas. So, I mean, if you're looking to recruit somebody, who's a parent, right? You can't juggle more than like things and work and home and a toddler doing this and that. I mean, parents do have a lot, I think, to offer to the visual effects industry stuff like patience, obviously, and you've obviously got things like dealing with situations on the fly and things like that. So, I mean, I've been in the point before where I've recruited a few people onto my team, knowing kind of their backgrounds and if they've got families and stuff like that, and if they're parents themselves, it lets me know that, okay, right, there's a certain level of kind of expertise and ability. I know that they're going to be able to deal with the situation head on. They're going to be able to take on these kind of different scenarios in their stride. And I think that's cool. So parents should never be discounted on anything from work. And I think that's a bit of something that needs to change within the industry here. I mean, obviously at a local level and also at a global level. Yeah.
One of the things, just before we move on to the next topic, that I've enjoyed the most about remote working is being in dailies and watching one of the young dads with their toddler screaming in the background about their blue pants not being right, and seeing a whole bunch. I mean, to be honest with you, probably 60 or 70% men go, oh, that's so nice. And it sort of almost enabled men to embrace their fatherhood in such a positive way. And I think it reminded everybody and reminds everybody that people have lives outside of visual effects and animation and games. We all have stuff going on. And when the kids run in because they've got a broken finger, which we have had on one of our meetings at Access VFX, or a bad shift at McDonald's or whatever, or my dog's bark, you know, I am focused on work, but there's other stuff going on as well, and that's okay, and I can still function, and everyone's very kind. It feels like everybody's being a lot kinder to everybody about that kind of thing, which I think is just lovely.
Yeah,
one thing as well I want to kind of throw in there before we jump on to the next thing is kind of like the idea of routine. So for me, routine is really important, because having a routine throughout a day for both work and home gives a lot of flexibility when it comes to being able to navigate with your family and your work what's going on that day. So I mean, everybody who's a newborn, like who's had newborn kids, definitely knows routine is key. And I think, if I give any advice to parents out there is get to a routine and stick to it, because that's going to be the best way to keep yourself sane.
Don't worry when it goes off the rails, because it will.
Oh yeah.
It's actually quite useful stuff there for visual effects projects.
Exactly.
Okay, so we really wanted to spend some time in this podcast talking about Indigenous representation in Oceania, and are their stories being told, and are they represented in our companies? Amber, would love to hear from you about that.
I would say, well, if I speak on behalf of Aotearoa New Zealand, it's a big thing to do, but we have emerging Māori, Pacifica, minority. We have emerging artists that are coming through, but what it is around, I want to say it's a little bit about normalizing what a visual effects career is. So promoting that to parents, ensuring that they're aware that this is a viable career path, that we're using STEAM approaches. So we're looking at science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So I'm responsible for a lot of render and data for, I guess, that big facility in Wellington. And it's really important for me to be able to look both holistically at the artists, but also at those who are wanting to get into technology. And so I'll go out into schools to talk to Māori Pacifica youth, to be like, this is actually a career path you can take. My hope is that we can encourage more to come through. We have got some wonderful educational spaces. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But for me, it's around creating opportunity, showing that it's there, and able to bring people through and be able to guide them through this journey. Because it wouldn't be something we'd think about.
Can you just give us a bit of an overview of the percentage of Māori people in New Zealand, just so that you've sort of described what the current situation is?
So we did a consensus in 2018, so 16.5% of all New Zealanders, or the people that were censored in that, will identify as Māori. About 8%, I believe, are Pacifica. So it's not it's a good chunk of our population, but what we're seeing is if I kind of know who's in the companies around me and who are actually in visual effects, I probably could count them using this. So that's quite, for me, disappointing. I would like to see more of us coming through into, especially the visual effects space. What I would like to also see is we've got a few courses that have set up specifically targeting Māori rangatahi, so that's youth. And that's where now I'm hoping we can start engaging as bigger visual effects companies, engaging more Indigenous youth through that way, perhaps creating opportunities, mentorships. That's a major reason for me to be a part of Access VFX, is opening up mentorships and how we can get youth rangatahi involved. So yeah, so we don't have, I would say, 16% Māori in visual effects, but I would like to see that represented as much as possible. Yeah.
What do you think the blockers are for Indigenous representation in New Zealand?
I think you touched on it earlier a little bit of socioeconomic, what you're getting offered at school, what is actually getting presented to you, how it's getting presented to you. So I talk about STEAM in the way where it's like, this is an opportunity we're pushing, which is fantastic, a lot of rangatahi into the sciences, but for some reason visual effects isn't seen as a science or a capability space to be able to go into that as well. So I would say it was education, it is opportunity. So when I go out into communities, I talk a lot around you can use your creative mind as well as your technical. So I guess and that's where I talked about normalizing it, would mean creating this as an opportunity for a career path. If I can do it, you can do it too. I mean, I come from a traditional film background, so I actually come from onset. I went through into post-production and into visual effects. So I've had a varied career, but when I was 5 years old wanting to be in film, I was that young and I wanted to do it, there was no career path for me to be able to get into it, nor was there actually the career that I'm now doing didn't even exist. So I talk a lot around, you can make it what you want it to be. It's a bit more established now with visual effects, but I guess for me it's right, if you want to see the change, you kind of got to be the change as well. So
representation is so important, Amber. It's so great that kids can look at you and have that inspiration to know that that's a career path for them, that they can follow how you've gone through your career. It's just amazing. And in Australia, it's really interesting because the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander population is only 3.3% of the population. So it's really tiny. And I can count on no fingers in my career. I don't know for sure, but I have a strong suspicion that we probably have had very limited Indigenous involvement in animation, visual effects, and games. And you know, it's I think Access VFX hopefully will provide us with a lot of opportunity to talk to sort of specifically target Indigenous groups here, to show them that this career is something that they, you know, there is a pathway for them, and try and illustrate that as an idea when as young as possible, so that they can be 5 and thinking, I can do this. So we can actually get that representation in there and provide some career pathways.
I guess Māori, for me, I see them as quite entrepreneurial spirits. So we've gone out and we've created our own, you know, animation studios, our own educational programs. We've started up game companies, and that's how we're engaging our rangatahi youth. But I would love for them to be also engaged into the wider VFX community and those AAA studios. So yeah, it's just about how we get them into that space.
Exciting times ahead. It's good to have this space to focus on Indigenous representation.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Kia ora.
So we thought we might talk a little bit about our plans for the year in Access VFX in Oceania. Obviously, we have a bit of a challenge, as everybody does, that we can't all get together, and how amazing will it be if we're all in the same place at the same time at some point in the future. But you know, obviously we would still like to have some impact this year and swap our focus onto, instead of meeting in pubs or parks, but meeting online and doing what we can do with the areas that are really accessible during a global pandemic. So Dora, would you like to talk a bit about our mentorship scheme, which I think is probably going to be one of the really important areas that we'll focus on this year establishing in our area?
Absolutely, yes. Like you mentioned, I think it's one of the most important aspects of Access Visual Effects, helping junior artists from every background, especially people that come from a low socioeconomic background, to enter the industry. And the mentorship scheme is on a platform provided by the company Prospela, and has been kindly funded by, sponsored by Foundry. And it's a great opportunity for people to register both as mentors or as mentees. So it's very easy to sign up. You need to be at least 18 years old but there's no age limit for signing up as a mentee. And need to be also in the UK, Canada, US, Australia, or New Zealand. Unfortunately, it's not global yet, but maybe in next year, be awesome. And so if you sign up as a mentee, you will get matched with a mentor that has the same similar background of what you want to achieve, or vice versa. And you can also be as a mentor, you can have multiple mentees, as much or as little as you want. There's a Slack channel set up for communication, so the mentor can communicate with the mentee quite regularly. Normally it's like once or twice a week, but this communication can be as short as long as people want. So it could be half an hour a week top, depending on how many people the mentor is also taking care of. And it's a great opportunity to help people, reviewing their reels, giving advice on how it works in the industry, real world problems or real issues that we experienced, and how we tackle that, or if you can be a mentee with kids, and maybe give tips of how to juggle kids and work and things. I think is really important, especially when we want to promote these for our Maori and Pacifica youth, and see that you can do this job as everybody else does, and also provide a role model for them to enter this. Potentially we would like to do some, maybe Christy and Amber can talk about outreach to schools. Why is it important to go to schools? What do you think?
I'll start if that's okay. Just on that, it's massively important. I think a real point of difference with some of the programs that are being developed at the moment is that ability to go into the schools and talk face to face. So it's about support. And so last year, a lot of our programs we called them bubble programs because we did them remotely. But that's still that support with a range of stakeholders, I guess, involved with the students. So, for example, what I mean by that is, so we go and we talk to the students, but we also talk to the whānau and we talk to the teachers. So we talk to everybody who supports that little ecosystem around that student. So they've got, a lot of resources around them. And so we want to enlighten and share our knowledge, not only with the students, but with everybody involved. And so we found that that's been really positive, and some of the responses from that have been fantastic. So we've been running our programs now for 7 years. We still struggle, to be honest, sometimes with a lot of traditional people in the sector. They see our program as being a talent identification pipeline, and it's purely commercial. Sure, there's an aspect of that, but the real value and the reason that we get support and buy-in from industry, and we get support from everybody involved in it, including the students, is because it's a well-being program. It's about identifying and it's showcasing that voice, as I keep saying, and that's the reason that it's continued. But we still have to push back a lot with people, because they say, well, you're starting too early. These rangatahi are, they're 10 years away from the industry. What value is that to us? But I've been a real advocate over the years of pushing back and saying, look at the results of this, and we've got some fantastic, not only data, but more importantly, some really amazing stories about these kids and how their lives have been changed by having a positive project that everyone works on together. As we know, the screen sector is probably one of the most collaborative of the arts in terms of every different discipline that's involved in making a piece of screen content. And so I feel really strongly about that, as you can probably tell, about how important it is to go into the schools and get the kids on board, make them feel excited about it, but also really push the importance of this project from an ongoing wellbeing point of view, based on the success that we've actually seen. So I feel that's something that it takes a lot of resource, and it takes a village. for everybody to get behind it. But it's been the genesis of all of our programs, and to be honest, it really helps support the bigger picture when people see that we're genuinely invested in making sure that those diverse voices and that those stories are being told all the way through. So yeah,
parents are key in this, aren't they?
Yeah, massively so. And all of the kids that we see come through that do well have always got either a really supportive parent or a really supportive teacher. So that's why we go and we want to convince everybody involved and see these examples so that they're passionate about it. It's really difficult to feel that you've got a voice, in a situation where you don't have a lot of people around you supporting you. So that's what we really try to focus on.
Yeah, I think you touched on one really cool thing there, Christy, which was kind of with outreach, the ability to teach the teachers. I think that's super important because sometimes the teachers might not know what to teach. Right. So, for example, when I was lecturing myself a few years ago, it was kind of very much getting out there and showing examples of how things work, and kind of like the important things weren't necessarily the hard skills. I think maybe the teachers are emphasizing a bit too much these days on hard skills and knowing the tools of the trade. It's also about the soft skills. So what I always taught my students is the hard skills are going to get you in the door, but the soft skills are going to keep you in there. Yeah. So being able to communicate and talk to people and being able to kind of like sit in a daily session and contribute, that's super important skills. Absolutely. And it should definitely be in more curriculum based kind of stuff, like being able to teach people how things work and like be a person. Like you're working in front of a machine 8 or 9 hours a day, like you need to be a person as well. Absolutely. So I think outreach definitely does that. Yeah, sorry.
I think so, and you're right. And it's we definitely focus on those hard and soft skills, but we also focus on the fact that they're transferable too. We don't want to be enabling or setting up any of our rangatahi to expect that they're going to go into the screen industry and have a specific role. We really try to move them away from, okay, I'm going to be a director, I'm going to be a producer. It's like, well, what do you enjoy about what you're doing? Because it's actually got lots of applications in so many other industries. So we always try to focus on that transferable aspect and supporting them in their career pathways. So that's something that, yeah, we and it works because I think that's the most helpful and meaningful way. And so everyone does, they tend to pick up on that and be like, yeah, that definitely works. And also I was just going to say quickly, I could talk about this all day, but with the teachers, they've got a massive workload as it is, as you can probably relate to. So we try to make it as easy as possible for them, and we go through and we schedule everything and say, okay, this is, for this term we need to have this by this date, and we just try to make it as easy as possible. And it's had some great results so far. So we're going to keep pushing that.
Absolutely, that's a really good. Thank you for your words. I wanted to hear from Amber, because I know you also done outreach in this period of pandemic, and I wanted to hear how was it? How did you do it?
I'd also like just to reflect back on everything that's just been said. So I was born into a single parent family from a part of Tamaki Makaurau, so that's Auckland, where I really wasn't raised with very much. But for me, when I stand here in front of everyone, I say the privilege I've had is my education. It has had the support of my whānau to believe in me. And when I said I wanted to get into film, it was a legitimate thing that I really wanted to do. So I had the support of my mother, and I had the support of some of the educational, my teachers that I had along the way. I also had the opportunity as well. I was raised overseas, so I did have a period of time where I entered a different educational system. And in that educational system, I actually was able to get mentored. I was mentored by industry people, so that was those who were in the film industry, and they came in and I got opportunities through that way. So I always talk around like it's working hard. Once you get that foot in the door, you have to work incredibly hard to keep maintaining that. I feel like I might have had to go 120% beyond what most people have been able to do. That's also because others come with privilege, that they've been able to get into that space. But I've never forgotten that, the privilege that I've had, which is my education and my family, to get me to where I am. So just to talk a little bit about what I've been doing through lockdown, it's been a lot of this. It's talking on a video. It's actually quite nice to be able to engage a little bit closer with others. So what might have been, I might have gone into a university and spoken to a couple of hundred people. What's nice in this space is that they tend to have 40. So I can engage a little bit more. I can answer questions. I can talk about what my journey might have been or what I can foresee for themselves. I always talk around, if you want to be in this industry, you want to be in film, VFX or gaming, create. You know, there's YouTube, there's different platforms for you to be able to keep creating and sharing what you do. And that's a great form of experience, which then gives you more opportunities to put into your show reel or into a way that you can just promote yourself. So I've done a lot of more of these sorts of things. Video, and that's been okay. It's a bit different, but it's been fun along the way as well. Yeah, learning kind of like this.
Yeah, which kind of segues nicely into another thing that we'll do this year with Access VFX as a chapter, which is doing online networking events. And as you said, Amber, you know, it does provide actually some opportunities to potentially have more targeted audiences, to create sort of Zoom meetings where we can put people into groups according to the area that they're interested in talking about, and just showing people that there's ways into this industry, that it's, you know, that it's open, and there are people out there that who've had a career path that they can look at and follow and learn from and be inspired from. So I think that's another thing as a group that we will hopefully do this year, is to do some online networking and get people talking and discussing this sort of important area of our industry in terms of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, we could do also some webinars. Foundry has contacted us, so we will, as soon as we want, we can do that in schools, and any kind of school would be awesome. And I feel like we have so much to say, and maybe another podcast would be fun.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think some podcasts would be good too. I think podcasts have become such an important part of this sort of remote and, you know, looking for content area. So finding some people with great stories like yours, Amber, will be really great to add into the already amazing amount of podcasts that Access VFX have already done. I mean, the website is just full of fantastic information for people that's really relevant for all of us. So, you know, and also one of the other things that we will be doing is reaching out to local companies to just talk to them about Access VFX and what we're trying to achieve. I think a big part of diversity and inclusion is just putting it on people's radars, because it isn't on every company's radar, and it's not for any reason apart from maybe hasn't really been thought about yet. I mean, I know that I'm guilty of that over the years, that I've just been focused on getting from A to B and getting a project resourced and crewed, and, you know, that the diversity thing has really become so much more of a focus recently, but it's easy to kind of work without thinking about this. So I think that's something that we'll be doing, is talking to local companies, involving as many people as we can in Access VFX, and see what results that we can get out of that.
Yeah, Tim, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to talk about like connections. I think making connections is very, I think, important, especially for like from the student perspective too. So if you're talking about outreach before, how we're getting to see obviously all the students in academies and stuff like that. I mean, making sure that we definitely like make those connections. I mean, those connections that they make at that point in time can definitely help them later on, and showing them it's possible, I think, is something else that Amber was talking about. Just being like, okay, right, it is possible to do this job. I mean, we can go in there, we can show people how this actually works and get them involved, and then that can help lead them back into the industry. So I think definitely that was more coming off the back of the outreach stuff, but yeah. I mean, definitely communication is key in all kind of very much all aspects of what we're doing, I think, here in Access VFX. So
yeah, it's a very good point. Why should people be excited about launching Access Visual Effects in Oceania? It's an open question.
Oops.
Anybody can jump on this.
For me, it's a natural extension. We work in a global industry. Access VFX has done wonderful things in the Northern Hemisphere. We have a really great industry down here with an already diverse range of people that work within it. It can always be improved. And for me, it's a very natural extension to the Access VFX work that we roll out some Oceania specific initiatives down here to keep all of our local companies looking at their diversity practices and increasing the diversity and providing people with support. It's really exciting.
Yeah,
for me, it's about mentorship. I think that's what's the exciting thing about me is actually being the ability to have like Prospella kind of giving us the facility to mentor other people within our area. I mean, for me, teaching and I mean, in my day-to-day job, I help people through their workflow problems or technical problems. And prior to that, I was teaching, and having the ability to actually teach somebody in your local area and see a growth and actually help show somebody the light essentially is, in my mind, super important. So I think definitely having the facility to do that is a big part of why Access VFX is going to really take off, I think, here in Oceania.
I just wanted to add to that in terms of, I think it's it brings a much needed and necessary resource as well. There's a lot of people out there who are working on their future strategies at the moment, so it's a great time to be able to incorporate that. As I say, in an organisation with some integrity and history, we can count on that to not be creating the wheel, but also adding a specific flavour within our region to it. So I think it's a fantastic resource for organisations to be able to access, which I think's on point.
And I'll just add into that the fact that there's the mentorship program, the opportunity for both Indigenous people, both here in Aotearoa, but also in Australia, to be able to be engaged, to be able to be helped with a pathway into an established career. I'll be super excited to see that. That's what I'm anticipating seeing in this space, and aligning a whole bunch of people in universities and schools into this way as well. And another thing for me is around, I do a lot in the diversity inclusion space, so just adding that additional voice into this to be able to have somebody, as you said, Christy, it's the integrity of what they've done before. So we've seen what Access VFX have been able to do in the Northern Hemisphere. Bringing it to the Southern Hemisphere means that we can, I guess, collaborate across the world, as you say as well, Lara. We are a global community. We do migrate, and we're big migration people around the world. And so if we can help influence a change in the industry, I'm super excited about that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Sounds like we are bringing our own nuance to the Access Visual Effects family. We are adding intersectionality of indigenous and our experience of working parents or queer, and yeah, it's fantastic. I'm so excited for what we are going to do next, and yeah, hopefully online, but maybe in the future. A bubble between our countries will actually work. We can actually meet each other.
So for everyone out there that's managed to listen to us all until the end, please look at the Access VFX website. You can already sign up to be a mentor or a mentee. And that is a really good place, a really good resource to learn a little bit more and watch this space. There'll be more coming out during the year. And it's been fun, everybody, having a chat and putting so many of our conversations into, you know, a condensed space. So thank you very much, everyone. It's been great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
See you guys.